There's a moment that every man hits where life just stops making sense. You've been grinding, doing everything right, and yet something inside you feels off. You're stuck, numb, tired of carrying everything and still feeling like it's not enough. We call it the wall, and most men hit it silently. In this video, I'm going to show you what this moment actually means, why it happens, and how to turn it into a breakthrough instead of a breakdown. If you've been feeling stuck, this can be your next step forward. Let's talk about this thing called the wall. It could come in the form of burnout. It could come in the form of identity crisis. It could be a quiet hopelessness that you feel on the inside. It happens in lots of different ways to lots of different men, and it's very, very real. In fact, I would go further and say it can be genuinely frightening when it happens on the inside of you as a man. It can happen at age 25, 35, 45. It doesn't seem to matter what age you are. It can even happen after you feel like you've done everything right. Your job, your family, all of your life might seem fine, but somehow on the inside you can feel hollow. And most men never ever name it. They never ever talk about it. As I said a moment ago, it can come in many different formats. It could be an emotional burnout. It could be asking yourself some scary questions about your identity. It can be asking yourself how to deal with regret and bad decisions in your past. But we've got to acknowledge the fact that so many men are dealing with this imminent threat, this crisis of hitting the wall on the inside, that when you get there, it makes you feel like tapping out, like giving up, like quitting and walking away. And many men suffer in embarrassed, shameful silence about the fact that they've reached this point. In fact, many men are so close to contemplating some really major decisions about how they're going to respond. Some are fantasizing about a tiny, small life where they can run away from everything. Some have already withdrawn emotionally and are just going through the motions of their life, but not really available to the people in their life. It's a big, big subject, and we've got to talk about it. If you're experiencing this very thing as a man, then we've got to talk about how do you stop this from becoming a breakdown moment in your life and actually turning it into a breakthrough moment in your life. You see, the way that you choose to respond to these feelings and this experience are going to play a huge role in determining where your life goes from this point forward. So let's talk about 3 practical things that you can do to turn this into a breakthrough and not let it become a breakdown. The first thing is you need to name it. In other words, you've got to recognize it, you've got to identify it, but you've got to name it. And the way you need to name it is to realize that this moment in your life isn't failure, but rather it's a transition. You are on the cusp of some brand new lessons, some shifts and some changes of season in your life where you're going from one stage to the next. And the fact is that sometimes crossing from chapter to chapter can be daunting. You know, I think of those documentaries about people who have ascended Mount Everest, and they talk about going through the ice fields where they've got to go across crevasses with these incredibly deep cracks in the ice that if you make one false move, the climber can disappear so deep they're never seen again. This is what it can feel like for some men, but it's important that you start with naming it. It's not a failure moment, it's a transition moment. Number 2, you've got to slow down long enough to rethink what's going on in your life. Some people get into a big panic in this moment and their thoughts speed up and go into hypervelocity and they make very hasty conclusions about what's going on. But I want you to make the choice to slow down and rethink. In this moment, we don't want to escape in a hurry. We want to go slow so that we can reflect. We can ask ourselves some wise questions and say, what is it I'm feeling? What is it I'm thinking? What's going on in my life around about me? And where am I headed? If we move too fast in this moment, it can compound the danger. Number 3, in this moment, we want to choose mission over maintenance. Or another way to say this could be choose mission over medication. What we often see men doing when they get to these transitional phases in their life is the pain, the disappointment, the confusion, the tiredness, they can all become too overwhelming. And so instead of moving towards mission and purpose, many men will move towards medication and maintenance. In other words, how can I add something through a bottle or a pill or an experience or a relationship or an expense? How do I do something to dull the pain and the confusion I'm feeling? I don't want you men to choose that. I want you to make the choice of mission to say, this is not the end for me, this is a crossover point for me, and I'm coming through to the other side a stronger man than the way I entered. It's basically going through the shift from just surviving to taking the lead over your life, and you've got the power to do it. Let's take a moment to understand where some of this is coming from. Why are men getting to the point where they do feel like tapping out, giving up, disappearing, hiding in silence? Let's go through some of the factors. First of all, let's understand that our culture heavily rewards productivity and not so much reflection. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm not going to stand here and say that productivity doesn't matter, because it does. But our culture rewards it so highly that it's made it almost the only value. How much can you achieve at work? How much money can you earn? How big is your house? What does it say on your resume? And we have overemphasized productivity to the point where we have diminished the importance of things like reflection, solitude, quietness, and simplicity, and it's to our detriment. Secondly, men have been taught to suppress and not reset. In other words, when you face one of these transitional chapter change moments, the lessons we've been taught are push it down, ignore it, deny it. Whatever you do, don't admit it, just suppress it, when in actual fact, what we need is a moment to stop, recalibrate, reset so that we can go again and it doesn't turn into a destructive moment. A third factor is that we follow outdated role models without questioning them. We look at some things that are not working, and just because it's been popular or traditional, we just copycat it without actually taking a moment to say, is this healthy? Is this good? Does this even work? Does this align with the kind of man that I'm trying to become? Or have I just subconsciously adopted some things that seem to be the right things to adopt? We've got to take more time and approach it more wisely than that. So let's get practical for a moment or two. What are some things that you can actually do when you get to these moments? Well, I want to give you 2 practical tips. The first one is like a journal prompt. It doesn't really matter if you actually use pen and paper or use your smartphone or just think in your self-talk, but use a journal style prompt with this question: where do I feel like I'm pretending? Now, this is a big question for you to ask, because you're going to have to get real with yourself. You're going to have to get honest with yourself. And usually for most men, we find ourselves pretending when we realize we've just lazily copycatted some other man's style. The way he dresses, the way he talks, the way he relates to women, what he's got to say about vocation and career, what he says about what family life should be, the material possessions you should be chasing after, what kind of house, where to live, what matters in car selection. We subconsciously adopt a lot of stuff. And it matters and it's valuable to stop for a moment and say, where have I been pretending? Because that will give you a clue as to why you're hitting some of these walls that are not working for you. The second practical tip that I want to give you, and I want to challenge you in a positive way, I want you to try to talk to one trusted friend this coming week. Just find a way over coffee or over a beer or on your way to work, at the sporting fields on a weekend, wherever you spend time with friends, See if you can weave it into a conversation to talk to a trusted friend and say, hey, listen, I've hit a bit of a wall lately and I was wondering if I could get your perspective on it, because maybe you've been there before. Maybe you've been through it. Maybe you know someone who has. Maybe you've got a few thoughts that could help me on my journey as I'm trying to figure this out. I know it's going to take a bit of courage. I know you might not be used to doing this, but if you would take that first step to talk to a trusted friend, you might be surprised at the process that can kickstart for you. Guys, if you're enjoying this video today and you'd love to get more of this kind of content, I want to let you know about an opportunity that I've just recently commenced. I've started a newsletter just for men. I call it Original Masculinity, Letters to Men, and in those editions of that newsletter, I write training tips and encouragements and inspirations, stuff that helps all kinds of men on the challenges that we face on our masculine journey. And you can be part of that newsletter. The link is in the description below. If you click on that, it'll take you to the sign up page and you can start receiving those emails real soon. So let's spend a few more moments being practical about this very serious, very important issue of what goes on for men when they feel like they've hit the wall. Something else that you might be able to do as a viewer of this episode is to think of a friend, think of a mate that you could share this with, who you either know or you suspect is getting close to the wall themselves. How might you know? You can see some of the hints, you can see some of the signs when men start to withdraw, they start to disappear from social gatherings, they start to drop a few comments that make you feel a bit concerned about their well-being. This will be a great episode to share with them, to let them realize they're actually not alone on this journey. Here's something else that you can do, because sometimes you might not be the friend sharing, you might be the friend listening. And when you're that friend listening, it's easy to get stuck and not know what to say. I'm going to give you a super tip here, and the tip is, don't put pressure on yourself to have all the answers to their questions. In fact, sometimes the best response is a second question. What do I mean by that? Just prepare yourself to ask a second question. It goes like this. When you ask a friend, say, mate, how are you really going? And then they start to get honest with you and they say, actually, I'm glad you asked because I'm not doing that well. I'm hitting the wall mentally. At that moment, a lot of guys freeze. They don't know what to do. But you don't have to be that guy. You can help your friend out by asking the second question, and it can be as simple as this. Simply say to them, tell me what you mean by that. Tell me what you're feeling and thinking. You'll be amazed if you can just give them the comfort to realize that they can go further with the conversation. You'll discover that helping one another actually becomes quite natural and organic, and you don't have to be worried about that moment. I'd love you to drop your comment down below about perhaps a moment where you've experienced hitting the wall and what you did about it. Maybe you've got some advice for other men reading through the comments where you could encourage them to say, hey, if you've hit that wall, don't give up, because it doesn't have to be the end for you. And that's really what I want to say to you guys in conclusion on today's video. The wall does not have to be the end. In fact, it can actually turn into a positive turning point. And crucially, what you decide to do in this moment will define the next chapter. I want you to stand up. I want you to lead again. I want you to make the choice that this will not become the moment that starts your breakdown, but actually this becomes a transition point for your breakthrough. I'd love you to stay a part of this journey. As I said, leave your comments, be a part of the conversation, and follow along right here on The Man Show with Andrew Gray, where we're doing everything we can to encourage men on their masculine journey to recovering their masculine heart. Thanks for watching, and I'd love to see you in another video real soon.